Hey everyone, in the event that we haven't talked about it, one of the things I did want to discuss in our Algebra 1 class is how to graph lines, how to graph equations when you don't have graph materials. Now graphing materials might include, but are not limited to, graph paper, copies of notes, copies of assignments, or some sort of gridded paper that you can use. I know that you might say, hey, that's graph paper. Well, it could be anything. I wanted to talk about this real quick because you don't always have those materials on you. And this is kind of like a back in my day sort of thing, but I remember way back in the day when I was taking Algebra 1, we didn't have graph paper, and the copies of our notes didn't really include graphs themselves. So it was important for us to learn how to draw graphs without having those materials. So we're going to talk about that today. I have two examples for you on this page. Y equals 1/2 x plus 9, and y equals negative x plus 6. And I'm going to go through these quickly. This isn't meant to be the longest video of all time, but let's just discuss basically what I would like to think of as the basic steps, the most important steps in drawing your graph. So let's just jump in. First things first, whenever you're drawing your graph, you have to have the two major axes. So I have an up and down line, and I have a left and right line, or horizontal line. Vertical and horizontal lines. These are our axes, as we like to call them. We have the y-axis, and we have the x-axis. Now remember that whenever we graph a point, we always graph the x-axis first. We always graph the x-coordinate first. So x is really the first. But now that we have this, there's the next step. So after we have our axes drawn, we need to create a kind of scale. And so I'm going to start out on the x, and I'm just going to try to draw lines that are well enough spaced out that I can kind of discern a sort of scale or spacing between the lines that's equal. Something like that. And I'm going to do the same thing for the y, and I want to try to keep this sort of space the same. So I'm going to look at this and say, maybe that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, now this is going to be important for us because, as you might have guessed already, I only have so much space on my axes. But I have enough because, as you've probably noticed by now, the y-intercept of my number 1 is 9. So I can actually start off by graphing that. I'm going to go ahead and do that. If the y-intercept is 9, that means I just go from the origin and go up 9, like that. So there's my first point. And remember that I only need a second point. Here's where the slope comes in. Now normally, our slope here is 1 over 2, and that means that we're going up 1, down 2. I'm going to put dn for down. So that indicates kind of a like this way or decreasing. Now there's a way that we can work backwards. And I hope that I mentioned this for you last semester. We can actually work backwards by flipping the sign on both of those. So 1 over 2 is the equivalent of negative 1 over negative 2. Notice that I now have two negatives to indicate an opposite direction effect. And really, negative over negative will cancel. But in this case, I want to use this so that way I can get a second point by working backwards. So down 1, left 1 is what down 1, left 2 is what this slope means. So I'm going to go down 1 point to here, and then I need to estimate a kind of left 2. And I know that the scale isn't quite the same, but it's going to be the best that I can make it. And remember, when we're graphing, we only need 2 points. So after we have our 2 points, it's easy to take the ruler that we have in Explain EDU, line these points up, and use the ruler to draw a line between those. So there is my y equals 1/2 x plus 9. Notice that this is an increasing line. That's beautiful. To re-illustrate these points yet again, I'm actually going to do this, and I'm going to do this a little bit differently because now that I have my ruler out, I can actually set this up, and I can actually use my ruler to draw my axes as straight lines, which is actually pretty cool. So let me go ahead and do that. That's going to be a little bit off, but that's okay. I want this to be at a perfect 270 degrees. Believe it or not, that's actually straight up and down. So I'm going to draw my other axis, and I can actually use the ruler to try to estimate where my lines might be. It looks like it actually won't let me. I apologize for that kind of let up. We can actually use our ruler, though, to draw straight lines, which will actually be very helpful. Remember that I have my y and my x axis. Now, I just need to indicate a sort of scale. I'll actually try to use this again, and I think I should be a little bit more able to do this. I just need to estimate lines that seem to be maybe, I don't know if this is a centimeter, I'm trying to use the lines as well as I can to estimate where these should be. And so hopefully you can kind of see where I am pulling the lines over from. Now I'm actually going to turn this so that way I can get a scale with my axis. And so this is a way that we can, try and keep a scale as we go to graph. So let me go ahead and erase these lines that came out and protruded. We don't want those. But in any case, I hope you see the point. And now this even looks more uniform than my last one did. I'm going to use blue. And so once we have our scale and once we have our y-axis and we have our scale, we're good to graph. So y is equal to negative x plus 6. My y-intercept is that positive 6. So let's start by graphing that. Positive 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up. There's my first point. And remember that I'm using slope to find a second point. In this case, slope is negative 1. Since slope is negative 1, this is negative 1 over 1. And I go down 1, right 1 to find my next point. I'm going to try and line this up as well as I can. There's my second point. Now, really, you could graph there. But in this sense, I really would like to find another point just because these two are really close together. That's a really short distance. So I'm going to use that slope again. Down 1, right 1 to find a third point. It's because the distance is so close between the 2 points that I want to try and get an accurate line by drawing more points. So now I can actually line up my 3 points and trace my line using the ruler. Go ahead and do that. Pull it off, draw my arrows. So this is how you can draw a graph without having the appropriate graph materials. You start by drawing your x and y axes, then you draw a scale, and you just go about the graphing procedure. So if you have any questions, you know how to reach out, email me. Until such a time, good practicing, good mathing. I'll see you later.